Thanks for everyone for joining. I think we might have gotten the panel that has the title with the most buzzwords in this entire conference. So hopefully we can break it down, make it useful. My name is Al Harnish. I'm the VP of Growth at Prolific Interactive. We're a product-focused mobile agency based in Brooklyn and San Francisco, partnering with brands to help them build their apps, figure out their mobile strategy, and also help them grow. And I'm excited to be here with a really great panel. And before I introduce the panelists, just to kind of quickly frame the conversation, I think we all have experience and see across the industry, companies are really good at collecting a lot of data, maybe not as good at figuring out how to leverage it, figuring out how to take advantage of it, and figuring out how to make it really actionable. So hopefully we can help kind of share some insight on how this group not only kind of takes advantage of the data, but how they're, like what their systems look like and how they're applying it in automation, machine learning, and in some other ways. Cool, so without further ado, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves.
So I'm Baron. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Showmax, which is a Naspers company. Showmax is a streaming video company that is focused on sub-Saharan Africa, mostly South Africa and Kenya, and then also on Central and Eastern Europe, mostly in Poland. And what we're trying to do is bring basically a combination of local plus Hollywood content to these markets, so that people get both, local directors, local content, local flavor, plus a lot of good Hollywood content as well. Naspers is our backing company. Naspers is a pretty large international investor with kind of known investments in Tencent, Flipkart, OLX, and a number of other portfolio companies around the world. And that's who's our kind of backing company.
Hi, everyone. I'm Prachi Snehal. I lead product management for 2BTV, mobile and growth. We are a streaming video platform, with content from studio partners like Lionsgate, MGM, Paramount, and hundreds of others. We are ad-supported and completely free, so download 2BTV today.
Great. And my name is Paul Brody. I'm the Chief Product Officer of CleverTap. And if you haven't heard of us, we are an intelligent mobile engagement platform. And unique about us is we allow you to understand what your users are doing in detail, their behaviors, if you will. And then we automatically will create segments of your audience that then you can engage with rich omni-channel campaigns to really drive the metrics that matter for your business.
Hey guys, I'm Shamant Rao. I head up growth for Fresh Planet. Fresh Planet is a studio that makes hit games. Our biggest one is called Song Pop 2. So if you like music and if you like trivia, I encourage you guys to check it out.
Cool, thank you. And just to frame the conversation, let's do a little 101 and start with a couple definitions. So, Paul, how are you thinking about automation? Like, what is that, just at the highest level?
Oh, sure. I mean, well, from a marketer's context, automation is really about eliminating the manual, those repeated steps that you do time and time again when you're trying to understand your audience and ultimately engage with them. And, effectively what we see going on is that increasingly what you're trying to do is to create the ability to kind of, string together sequences of campaigns for users in kind of a lifecycle engagement strategy where the marketer doesn't have to think about everything kind of time and time again. And so also, I'd say also associated with automation is this notion of really understanding what your users are doing. Typically, people might swim through a sea of data to really try to pinpoint kind of what their user behaviors are. But increasingly, a good automation system will go through your data and actually extract out these segments of interest. And then they'll actually go one step further and really help you make decisions about how to interact with them. Doing things such as recommending the best time of day to interact with a particular segment, or even with recommendation engines, potentially even recommending the type of content you want to actually push out to those users.
Cool, thank you. And Baron, how about machine learning? What is that?
So my poor product manager's definition of machine learning is basically AI that trains itself to improve over time and help you hit specific metrics or improve the way it's doing something. So you apply it basically to a large set of data with a particular goal, a particular metric in mind, and then the idea is that you set what you're trying to do, how you want the algorithm to perform, and then say, here's the specific target we want you to hit, go kind of algorithm and figure it out. So the way that we use it largely is for recommendations. So we're think about Netflix. If you think about when you go in and there's the personalized for you and all of those different types of rows that you're seeing when you join Netflix or when you see Netflix, that's all driven largely by a combination of machine learning. We do the same type of thing. The idea being people who watch shows similar to you also are interested in these types of shows, or here's other content you're interested in, and the algorithm improves as it sees what do people click on, what do people not click on, what are people actually watching and finishing.
Cool. And then the third and final definition, CRM. I feel like CRM is something that used to be, pretty straightforward. It was one, extra tool in your tool chest that you would buy or build. But as the space evolves, it's kind of turning into more of a philosophy and a series of tools that you piece together. Prachi, with that in mind, how are you thinking about CRM? And how is it coming to life in your company?
Right. So for us, it has evolved over time. So back in 2016, we were trying to tinker around with Firebase to do a little bit of push notification and testing it out, even though back then Firebase was not very stable. We did manage to do some pushes. It was successful, but it was not scalable in terms of the resource requirements. So we actually vetted few CRM providers or messaging providers and finally ended up integrating with Braze. And since then, it's been amazing how we can define the entire user lifecycle, build canvases, build a flowchart of the entire user journey based on both the user lifecycle as well as user actions, and then also integrated with machine learning. So each user will get their own personalized content recommendation and push notifications and emails. So it's come a long way for us. And in general, I think industry is moving that way too.
Cool. And Shamant, I believe your approach is a little more build as opposed to buy. How are you approaching it?
Yeah. We decided to build primarily because our company is a couple of years old, even though I'm relatively new. And we built it because this was 3 to 4 years ago. We didn't quite have the sort of sophisticated, robust systems that are available now to communicate with our users on a very granular basis at scale. So that was certainly the primary reason we decided to build our own system. The other reason was also that by building our own system, we could marry all the different sources of our user information seamlessly within our own database without necessarily having to fiddle around with a lot of third-party data and trying to make sure it lines up with our own internal data. So that was a thinking process behind the way we structured our CRM internally. It would be very different if I had to make that decision today, simply because I think CRM's come a long way in these years.
Cool. And Paul, being on the vendor side, I think you have the luxury of seeing trends across the space. So are you seeing any particular trends leaning one way or the other, or how do you see most of your vendors, or sorry, your customers setting things up?
Yeah, I mean, first off, at a high level, let me emphasize what you started out with. Is it's kind of a series of systems here. Is, to me, and what we've seen kind of evolve in the industry, is CRM is more of a concept. It's not a point solution or a database per se. So, I mean, in computer science speak, this is really more about it's not a physical entity; it's a logical one. So, I think, for our customers, and I think it's probably generally from the panelists here, people want this kind of unified, holistic view of a customer, a 360-degree view of what they did. But increasingly, it's very rare that it resides in one system these days. And so what you'll see is, I think the important thing to emphasize is that you need to look at unifying, sometimes in real time, especially in a mobile context, data from multiple disparate sources to really come up with that kind of unique profile of the user that you can then act on kind of in a real-time fashion. So I really do think of CRM these days as kind of a marriage of multiple disparate data sources that need to come together at the right time for the marketer.
Cool, thank you. So with that in mind, kind of the stack in place, how are you all approaching automation itself? Baron, why don't you start?
So I think kind of similar to what Prachi and Tubi is doing, we do quite a bit of personalized recommendations in our email and in our push notifications. So based on what we've seen you watch, what we think is good content for you based on other collaborative filtering. We do have some event-based notifications. We still do some that are manually thought through. So I think we're kind of in the progression now of, as we're getting our machine learning to work better, we're starting to import more and more of that into, we use Braze as well, so into Braze for the purposes of targeting specific users. So things that we're doing are, hey, there's a new show that we think you'd be interested in. Here's a push notification, or here's an email about that. Here's kind of weekly newsletters with 3 or 4 different recommendations of current content to watch that we think you'd be excited about. We also do some basic lifecycle automation. So first 7 days, we use kind of the Canvas part of Braze for that to outline what emails you want to get based on your activity within the specific lifecycle. So did you view on your first experience? Did you not view on your first experience? That triggers a particular type of emails and pushes that you're going to get. And then what we're still sort of doing manually is we're still sending some newsletters. We're doing a lot of the tests manually. And then when we find things that work, we elevate those to the automated side and start to use them that way.
Cool. And Shamant, how are you applying automation?
Yeah, we apply automation in a couple of ways. And this is primarily a function of the fact that we wanted to, as much of our system to be set it and forget it, to the extent that we could manage. One of our ways is just by having an automated onboarding sequence, which is a welcome email all the way through that day 14. That's something that works very, very effectively for us. Then we have retention and win-back emails that are automated and that are set up to go with specific triggers. We also have specific content that is automated inside of the emails, which could be something like, hey, these are the playlists that have just gotten added. These are the playlists you would like. Come back and play. I think those are the main forms in which we automate our CRM communications.
Cool. And Prachi, when we were discussing this earlier, you had an interesting kind of before and after scenario of before you were focused on this and after. Why don't you walk through that?
Sure. So once we integrated Braze and passed all the events that we wanted to, we were very clear about that. After that, okay, what do we do now? So we start setting up campaigns manually, right? So we have millions of users. You can't personalize for all of them manually. So we used to divide users into like 6 or 7 segments or how many ever was possible based on genres of viewing. Like if somebody watches comedy, they all fall into the comedy bucket. Same with horror and action, right? And then we would set out, we will make 10 different campaigns and send them out to each of these segments. Obviously not the most optimal way to reach out to your users, even though it would take the entire day for me or my teammate to set it up. And we were seeing sub-industry standard engagements, which was obvious. That's what triggered us to go ahead and automate the whole thing. To get more personalized content out to users, and B, so we can get our Fridays back. So that's when I got in touch with my data scientist, got the entire endpoint built to Braze, and we started testing it. The first test we did, it was recommending weird content which we were not sure of because it's not like A-rated movie. Why is it the machine is recommending to this user? We were like, yeah, anyways, we'll test it out to a few handset of users, and we saw 100% higher engagement, which was an eye-opener for us, and that was, after that, rest is history. So we've just automated most of our lifecycle campaigns since then.
And what triggers those lifestyle campaigns? Is it the API driven? Is it figuring out front end behaviors, or is it something else?
Right. So most of the heavy lifting is done in the back end, where we use cosine similarities as the base to get the movie recommendation, and then we have very smart data scientists who do a lot of things that I don't understand, and then each user ID is attributed to titles, right? And then we have different sections of titles, like leaving soon, which is these are the titles leaving soon, so come watch. These are the new arrivals, and these are the general recommendations for you. So we have a whole set of titles associated with each campaign and each user ID. And then the triggers happen based on our user lifecycle.
Cool. How about you, Baron? What's the approach? Is it triggers? Is it behavioral? Is it marketing? Is it a mix of everything?
It's a mix. I don't think it's so dissimilar from what they're talking about, what Prachi's talking about, honestly. We do a fair number of importing of events into Braze as well, based on where users are in their life cycle and where they are sort of in their billing cycles as well. We look at, what do we want them watching? How do we get them to watch more content? So what we've learned is pretty important to us is we do monthly subscription. And if someone is watching a series at the end of a month, or is in the middle of a series, or is finding a new series, that's a really good predictor that they're engaged, they're likely to stick with your product, they're likely to be retained. So what a lot of our events focus on is how do we find that next new series to get you engaged with and watching, such that we know that you're going to have at least 5 or 6 more episodes, that you're going to want to stick with us. So that's one of the big things we focus on. We also are starting to look more at how can we drive you cross-platform. So we haven't done a great job with that historically, but we do know that our users who are on multiple platforms are more engaged. And so if we can find ways to get you to install our television products or our mobile products through our notifications and all of those, that's something we're starting to push more as well as a way to retain customers. But it all kind of comes back to viewing leading to retention, and that's what we focus on, and all of the events and notifications we do center around that.
And Paul, when you bring on a client, they bring on CleverTap, how are they thinking about it? Is it more heavy towards triggered? Is it more heavy towards, like cohorting? How is that approach?
Yeah, no, we see it all, as you might imagine, the wide spectrum of it. I'd say I would, and I can end here with a specific customer example that might illuminate the power of some of this. But on one hand of the spectrum, we have a lot of customers that would put in the transactional bucket. These are customers like mobile payment customers, ride-sharing services, people who do travel, booking, ticketing, those types of things. Typically for these types of services, it's very transactional in nature. It's trigger-based behaviors that the campaigns are really set up. The user does an action, a campaign gets triggered based on them purchasing something or opting into kind of a particular ride or something like that. Very common. On the other end of the spectrum, it's actually pretty interesting, is we have quite a variety of, I guess, content-oriented apps, publishing apps. And they approach the problem completely differently, is as opposed to a behavioral trigger that automates the delivery of a message, they look at a bucket of content they want to promote to their users, and they're trying to figure out which of their audience segments this bucket of content will most resonate with, so they can actually do promotional campaigns to that audience. And in that context, they use quite a bit of kind of behavioral segmentation, looking at past behaviors. Here's where machine learning comes in, where you try to predict who is going to potentially view a movie of a particular genre in the next 5 days, and then actually do promotional campaigns to that audience segment. The example I'd like to give from one of our customers that kind of, I think, illuminates a very simple example that illuminates some of the power of this automation and trigger-based campaigns is actually, one of our customers is a company called Gojek. They're actually one of the largest ride-sharing services in Southeast Asia. And endemic to these ride-sharing applications is this use case where we all do this, by the way, you kind of go up there, you check the price of a particular ride, and then you actually don't complete you don't book the ride. And they know that within like a tight window, a 15-minute window, if that user doesn't actually book that ride, they never will, because they've gone to a different service or they've walked or something like that. And so they've set up a completely automated trigger-based campaign where at minute 15 for that particular user, they'll fire off a programmatic campaign. We call it in our system a webhook campaign that hits out of our system that hits their back end, and they have a fraud detection system that's running all the time, and they'll actually check that user's profile to see if they qualify for a discount in this case. If they do, they'll raise an event and push it back server-side, all programmatically into our system that says this user qualifies to get a coupon, if you will. And within milliseconds of that 15-minute window expiring, they get a push notification with a coupon in it that all they have to do is click on it, they'll get $3 off of that ride. It's been extremely effective for them to get lift in conversion, but also, to your point earlier about spending whole days creating campaigns, once they knew this scenario was important to them, they automate it, and it's fire and forget. They never have to look at that again.
Cool. So speaking of machine learning, Prachi, how are you using machine learning today?
Right. So very early on, we realized if the user does his second session if the first day of installation, he has 50% chances of retaining. 50% higher chances of retaining. So our entire campaigns, all the triggers, everything was based off that, right? We were seeing, but we were not seeing that great of an engagement till we actually launched the machine learning integrated brace with it. Now how we are using it is very interesting. So we are finding different ways to get the user to do more actions, which will get him to retain better. And as Baron mentioned, right, moving to multiple platforms, for us OTT, which is over the top, big TV, Roku's and Amazon Fire Stick, all those platforms are very important because we know that users who are there will come back more often and consume more content. So how do we push users there is one of the key aspects, and finding out triggers all through the algorithms that we are building in the back end, and then passing it to Braze to make the campaigns and send the campaigns out has been working well. We are still in the process of figuring out, because there are a lot of times when we don't know if this is the same user who's on mobile is on OTT as well, because we allow guest sign-ins. So how do we tackle those issues? So there's a lot of different things that we are trying out. For now, primarily we are now that we have automated things, the personalization part of things, now we can focus on getting and reaching out to these other low-hanging fruits and getting them out of the way.
Cool, thank you. And Shamanth, how are you using and applying machine learning today?
Yeah, we use machine learning primarily to build on some of the behavioral segmentation that we've done, very similar to what Paul talked about. So we have data and patterns about what playlists our users have engaged with in the past historically, and we use that to we have a predictive recommendation engine that says, okay, these are the kind of genres they're interested in. These are the genres they could be interested in. These are what we'll surface to them. That's one of the ways in which we've used machine learning. Something else that's interesting that we've used in one of the past companies I worked at was that I described this particular application almost as conversion optimization for CRM, which was that, okay, we would send out emails and pushes for when we had specific events, which could be, that was a crossword game. So when we would have St. Patrick's Day special or a Halloween special, we would have a special crossword. And we would want for users to make a purchase in that. And we had a conversion that we wanted to optimize for, which was purchase. And at that time, we used a third-party CRM tool, and we would set up a purchase as a conversion, and we would have the tool and the campaigns optimized for this conversion. So we would iterate between the different copies, different copy variants. We would iterate between different times of day when the campaign would go out, and we saw some very impressive improvements in our conversion rates just by identifying one conversion metric and having the CRM system optimized for this. And I thought that was a very cool application that we actually implemented.
That's awesome. Baron, how about you? Are you using machine learning at Showmax today?
Yeah, I was actually going to give an answer that's not about VOD because I feel like Prachi and I keep sort of having similar answers. Yeah, so one of actually the most interesting applications of machine learning in the Naspers portfolio actually came from Letgo. I don't know if everyone here knows Letgo, but Letgo is a classified product in the US. And one of the really awesome things that those guys did was the team started to take a photo and then use the machine learning algorithm to identify what was in the photo. So rather than it being the historical Craigslist posting of let me put in a description and add some photos and hopefully you find it, they just went to take a photo, upload it, let the machine learning actually drive what is listed. And since they've done that, I think they've seen their listings go up some incredible order of magnitude. So for them, that was one of the most interesting applications that we've seen across the portfolio. On Showmax, it's actually quite similar to what Prachi said, so hence I wanted to give a different example because I think you did a great job of answering it already. Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds pretty clear just between this panel and also all the talks throughout the last couple of days that machine learning is something that a lot of companies are focusing on, and it's making a really big impact if they're able to do it right. For the marketer, for the product manager in the audience who's really just dipping their toe in the water or has aspirations to start leveraging machine learning but maybe hasn't done it yet, Paul, what's a tip that you might give that person?
Panic. It's difficult. No. Yeah, I mean, first off, we do see it quite prevalent with our customers. Not so many people are actually doing practical applications in scale today, but a lot of people are experimenting with it because now is the time for people to really figure this out. So I really encourage, if you don't have a machine learning effort going on in your organization, explore it. It's not that complicated. The first thing I run into more often than not has nothing to do with technology because there's a lot of kind of common algorithms that you can run on specific problems that require, you know, you need a data science function or some competence internally, but you don't really need a lot of it. But what most people kind of get tripped up off the bat is kind of what they're trying to solve. And so I encourage people to first think about a very specific problem statement that you want to put machine learning algorithms towards. We hear people come to us all the time and say, well, we want to improve conversions. That's pretty broad, right? I mean, that's a little bit hard to work on. And so with one of our customers that had a very successful deployment of machine learning algorithms, we work with them to help them predict which of their customers are going to convert, yes, but actually purchase a movie ticket for comedy shows in the next 5 days. Very, very, very specific kind of conversion that you can measure and actually train your models with over time. And more importantly, you can understand and make sure you have the right data capture to actually solve that particular problem statement. So first and foremost, I have a very crisp problem statement to start with, I would say. And the second thing I would say is not everyone has the luxury of being able to hire brilliant data scientists. They're rare these days. They're hard to find. They're expensive. And so if you're looking for a third party or kind of a vendor to help you out, make sure you understand. Make sure it's kind of almost like an open kimono relationship. I think one of the things people fall into is this trap of buying black box technologies, and if you don't understand the basis of the answers, you're probably not going to trust it. You won't use it in production. So make sure your vendor is very open with, here's how we're running these algorithms, here's what this answer means, here's how we came to this result, so that you feel very comfortable with kind of the assumptions that underlie it.
Cool, thanks, Paul. I think we have probably time for one quick question.
Yes, all right. A popular topic area today is around frequency of communications, and in this case, the question is around, I know we struggle with this at Adobe with marketing to our customers, is you have like one group of folks doing kind of campaign-based messages around a promotion or some sort of seasonal thing or a new show is launching or something like that, and then you have your automated campaigns that you've set up in whatever your marketing automation platform is. How do you ensure that those are aware of each other and that you're not sort of over contacting or that one is making another one less relevant than it might otherwise be?
Sure. For us, two things. One is global frequency capping, and second thing is prioritizing the campaign. So if it's a feature announcement, you prioritize it over the newsletters. And that way, the global frequency capping will make sure that your feature announcement is going out and not send the other campaigns out. So that's how we manage it, but I don't know if there are better solutions out there.
Is anyone using two different tools for like the automated stuff versus the batch or campaign-based stuff?
We used to, and we migrated everything recently, and it's a total communication nightmare. It just means that the people managing CRM have to be constantly monitoring. Now that we've transitioned mostly to Braze, it's a similar answer. The one thing I put as a spin on this answer, though, that I always think is interesting is that a lot of people don't think about in the frequency capping that you actually have two kind of opportunities to send more emails, which is your early users actually are generally more receptive to more emails because the risk is if you lose them, you're going to lose them anyways, so send them more emails. So what I see a lot of companies making the mistake with is they cap it too low for people in their first 7 days, but then on the other side of that curve for your most engaged, they actually also want to receive more emails. So the other piece of practical advice is realize that like a single cap across the user base is not always right. And in many cases, it's better to think about it from the perspective of different users at different stages of the life cycle need different caps.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much.